Welcome to another SCARFS video. This one is looking at comma splices and offering up some strategies. So if you've identified a student as having an issue with comma splices in their writing, then here are 3 practical ways to try and help that student. The first one is to get the student just to read aloud what they've written. It may be enough that they notice that the pause isn't quite right for a comma when they read it aloud. The second is to look at what they've written before the comma and after the comma. Ask them to look at that and ask themselves, are they actually complete thoughts that would stand alone as sentences? Because if the answer to that is yes, then they've got a comma splice and they need to do something to fix that, one of these 3 things. The third way that's a really practical strategy is to provide some sentences from whatever you're studying in class where you have gone through and deliberately made the sentences incorrect by adding in comma splices. Then ask the students to fix those. And it'd be good if you can get a mix of it, all 3 different fixes in the original text so that you can see if students are identifying the different ways to fix comma splices. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so I'm an English teacher, so I may be studying 1984, the novel, and so I could use the first line of the novel. It was a bright, cold day in April. The clocks were striking 13. This is a comma splice. We could fix it by making it 2 separate sentences, using a semicolon or adding in a conjunction. Now, the clocks were striking 13 is a powerful opening line, a section of an opening line to a novel, because it introduces a sort of unsettling atmosphere. So I think George Orwell would have wanted to keep those 2 things together. So I would be suggesting that you go with a coordinating conjunction here and put "and" in there. It was a bright cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. Okay, here's another example from a little later in the novel 1984 by George Orwell. The Ministry of Love was the really frightening one. There were no windows in it at all. Now, I've deliberately made it a comma splice. In terms of how to fix it, well, let's go through the options. Adding a conjunction, like the Ministry of Love was the really frightening one because there were no windows in it at all, would change the meaning somewhat, because it would be suggesting to the reader that the reason it was the really frightening one is because there were no windows in it at all. Now, while that's a little bit unsettling, I don't think it's enough to make it the really frightening one. So it would make more sense that these are 2 separate ideas that George Orwell is presenting. So a coordinating conjunction, like the Ministry of Love was the really frightening one and there were no windows in it at all, might work. But so would 2 separate sentences. The Ministry of Love was the really frightening one. There were no windows in it at all. Okay, so that would work. Students may also use a semicolon, which would be grammatically correct, or a coordinating conjunction, whereas a subordinating conjunction, you could explain why that probably wouldn't be correct. And this, by the way, is how it is in the original novel. So these are just some ideas on how to get students to start thinking about the ways to address comma splices and enhance the meaning of their writing at the same time. Okay, thank you.